You can't have a discussion about homosexuality without discussing the Bible. The Bible is often quoted to condemn homosexuals. In fact, our laws in this country which prohibit sexual activity between people of the same gender are based upon biblical quotations. Many people have different perspectives on the Bible, and as you know, the Bible has been used to support things as far-fetched as the slavery of black people and to oppose things as obtuse as the Panama Canal Treaty. The Bible is used to keep women in a subservient role. It was used by Christians to condemn Jews. It was used by Catholics to condemn Protestants. The Bible is used by any number of people to support their position. The Bible, in reference to homosexuality, is cited in about 5 specific places. The first of which is the book of Genesis, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. This is the story of God telling Abraham that he's going to destroy the city of Sodom. And Abraham pleads with God to spare the city if he can find 10 just men. God says, all right, Abraham, if 10 just men can be found in the city of Sodom, I'll spare it. So God sends 2 messengers to Sodom, and they're met by Lot. Lot is a man who lives in a small house outside the town, and Lot invites them in as his guests. According to the story, all of the men and the boys of the village surrounded the house and said to Lot, "Let these visitors come out that we might know them." Well, Christian traditions said for many, many years that what the men and boys of the village were saying was, "Let these men come out that we might have sex with them." There's a lot of debate about that. The overwhelming majority of Scripture scholars do not believe that Genesis 19 had anything to do with homosexuality. They think instead it probably had something to do with rape or inhospitality. The reason for this is that a few years ago, Derek Bailey, an Anglican theologian, did a study on the word yada, Y-A-D-H-A, which is the word to know that is used in this passage. And of the 943 times that that word appears in the Old Testament, only 10 times does it mean have anything to do with sexuality. Further, the argument goes is that none of the prophets of the Old Testament referred to Sodom as being destroyed for its homosexuality. Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah all talked about it being destroyed for its disregard for the poor, its basic injustice, or its general immorality. No one ever talked about Sodom being destroyed in the Jewish tradition because of its homosexuality. Later, in the New Testament, Jesus makes reference to Sodom when he sends his apostles out 2 by 2 to preach the good news. And he says to them, "If you're not welcomed in the city into which you enter, shake the dust from your sandals, and I swear that Sodom will fare better than that city in the final judgment," which leads many Scripture scholars to suggest that Sodom was indeed the story of inhospitality, and that the city was destroyed because of that. The second passage that is most frequently cited is from the book of Leviticus. The book of Leviticus was written by the tribe of Levi, of the 12 tribes. The tribe of Levi wrote all the rules and regulations that a person would have to follow in order to be a true Jew. The Jews were a people, a struggling people, a people that was being constantly warred upon by other tribes, other peoples. They were a tribe of people who believed in one God. They were monotheists. They were surrounded by people who believed in many gods and who had many temple practices to worship these other gods. And the book of Leviticus, strictly writes down what one can do and cannot do in order to be a Jew. One cannot eat pork, for instance. The penalty for eating pork was death. One cannot eat shellfish, no lobsters, crabs, oysters, clams, no shellfish. A woman, if she was raped, was instructed to marry her rapist. A woman could not have sex during menstruation. A person who had a hooked nose or a humped back could never approach the altar as a priest. And the book of Levi, in chapter 18, prohibits men laying with men as they would lay with women, such as an abomination. Well, the word abomination is used throughout the book of Levi. It's not solely attached to homosexuality. According to Dr. John Boswell from Yale University, the author of the book Christianity, Social Tolerance, and Homosexuality, which is really the definitive study of the Bible and homosexuality, the book of Levi, Leviticus, is probably the only source of both the Old and New Testament that truly talks about men having sex with men. Boswell doesn't believe, as do most scripture scholars, that Genesis had anything to do with homosexuality, nor does he believe that St. Paul, in writing to Romans and Corinthians and Timothy, the letter of Timothy, really talk about homosexual sex. He does believe that the authors were talking about men laying with men. Now, what is the explanation for that? If you're a fundamentalist, if you believe every word of the Bible was written by God at the time that it was written for all time, then you must believe that men cannot lay with men, that such is an abomination. Nor can you eat shellfish, pork, or do anything that is prohibited, because God didn't make exceptions. What happens with the book of Leviticus is that the passage on homosexuality is the only passage anyone quotes today. No one quotes any of the rest of Leviticus unless you happen to be an Orthodox Jew. What scripture scholars from my tradition, which is Roman Catholic, say is that you have to understand the intent of the author, and you have to understand what was the cultural context of the time. As we've talked about earlier, homosexuality was not understood when the book of Leviticus was written. People presumed that a man lying with a man, as he would with a woman, is a man who was born heterosexual, who for some reason is deviating from that heterosexuality and having sex with another man in a homosexual fashion. And that was forbidden. Well, scripture scholars are suggesting that the authors were prohibiting heterosexuals from having homosexual sex, but they had no concept of homosexuals, people born homosexual or homosexual by age 5, having sex with another homosexual. If you're the kind of person who takes the Bible literally, then you shouldn't be engaging in homosexual sex if you're homosexual, nor should you be eating shellfish or eating pork or violating any of the other laws of the tribe of Levi, of the Jewish tradition in the book of Leviticus. If, on the other hand, you are a member of a major mainline Protestant or Christian denomination, and you, like the rest of us, take a critical approach to what was the intent of the author, you're not a fundamentalist, you're not an evangelical, you don't take the Bible literally, then you understand that the author of the book of Levi didn't understand male or female homosexuality. It's interesting to note that there is nowhere in the Old Testament that any of the authors prohibit sex between women. It's only that it comes up in the New Testament. But if you're an Orthodox Jew, lesbian, there's nothing to worry about because there's no law against you engaging in sex with another woman.